go to the table further over and you get information about the Heritage Center. Murray, do you want to come on up here? Sure. This is Murray Westby. Some of you may know Murray.
Well, thank you, Lionel, and good afternoon, folks. It's great to see so many here. Lionel and I are supposed to be singing this show, and we're something like Elizabeth Taylor's eighth husband. We kind of have an idea what we're supposed to do, but we're going to try to make it interesting. However, and George is a pretty hard act to follow. And of course, we've all known George for many years, and George, as he said, they've made a major commitment. He set the bar pretty high for the rest of us, George. That's the, yeah. But what he says is very, very true. And these people have worked very hard, and it's been quite gratifying, I think, the response you've had so far. However, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just going to try to relate a few things about early business in Watrous, and hopefully the transfer to the younger generation, and some businesses are still active. And I am old enough to remember and have known personally some of the very early pioneers, like the Burndalls, Tom Burndall, Jack Findlay, names that will be familiar to many of you. And I've had the privilege, as I say, of knowing those people as a small boy when they were in their prime back in the 40s, and it's really gratifying to see that we still have the things that they've started out and handed down. Tom Burndall came from Norway, and as most of you will know, came out here with three of his buddies. I think there was Bert Holland and an Odney, and who else? There was four of them, and established a settlement, or a homesteaded, I guess, out about a mile west of here, and that is where Tom went into business with his first store, and eventually there was 2 or 3 other businesses that set up there. Then the railroad came through in 1906 and 7, and they decided on Watrous. And like most railroad towns, it's built in a slough, and and it was given the name of Watrous to fall in with the alphabetical order of the Grand Trunk Pacific at that time. And so consequently, Tom Burndall and other people that had established moved their business places into Watrous. And these people, it's amazing. And Prairie Reflections, if you don't have a copy of that, I think there are still copies available. And they're really at a bargain price. They're selling for the same price as they did in 1983, 4. And that's really where I get a lot of my information. And I urge you, if you haven't already read the book, you should do so. Anyway, the Burndall moved his business into town. The very first building that was built in Watrous and still exists was built by Frank Keeler in 1907. And that building is what is presently the model meet. It had many, many uses over the years. I can remember when there was a guy that sold oil burners in there when they were all the go back in the early days. And that building is still there. It's amazing too how many businesses moved and went from one building to the other. And there were an awful lot of fires in those days, and I think mostly because of the fact that it was the heating and lighting that they had in those days. But if you read the history book, you'll find it. Anyway, and this is just taken out of the history book. In 1910, which is a couple years after the town was established, or the village, there were 57 businesses, according to Prairie Reflections. I'm pretty old, but I'm not that old. 4 lumberyards, and there actually were 6 in 1908. But you can imagine the activity that there would be, because if you go back and read about that history, all the business places that started up in 07, 08, 09, and two hotels, one of them which still exists, the Manitou Hotel. It started out as a 3-story hotel, and I think in the windstorm of 1976, the roof got damaged, so the owners of those days turned it into a 2-story hotel. And the Clark Block, or the Tourist Hotel, it was known in those days, and it's gone, of course. 5 cafes, 4 drugstores, 4 realtors, 1 dentist, 3 doctors, 2 lawyers, 2 blacksmiths, 2 banks, 4 general merchants, 2 butchers, and 3 liveries. And in 1908 to 1910, a guy by the name of Rolly McLeod had a hardware store in one of Tom Berndahl's buildings in the Berndahl block. And he moved to Winnipeg in 1910 and started what became the chain of McLeod hardware stores. There were a number of other businesses that started in those days. Most of them do not have any direct descendants involved in the business, although the business name Fotheringham's Funeral Home is one. It's owned by different people. There's no Fotheringhams involved anymore, but it still goes under the trade name of Fotheringham's Funeral Service. And we've got going in more modern times, and I'm sure I'm going to miss somebody, and please holler out if you think of it. There's a number of businesses that are now operated by family members that were established over 50 years ago. And 3 of them that I can think of, and as I say, I probably have missed somebody. Ben Schrader, Watrous Tire and Battery, started back in the 1950s, and it's still carried on under the trade name Watrous Tire and Battery by the Schrader family, Blair. Woyden Construction, Frank Woyden started digging ditches back in I'm not sure what year it is, I don't think the Woydens are here, but okay. And their family, of course, is still quite involved in the construction an earth-moving business. And Dale Hayter Drilling came to Watrous back in the mid-50s. I myself got involved with Gordon Finley, as many of you will know, and we were partners for 25 years, and Gordon's dad, of course, established Finley Machine Shop. I'm not sure what it's called back in those days, but in 1908 he started up the blacksmith shop, and we're down on 3rd Avenue there, and some of you will remember that. And that's where I started. Ben Schrader was our neighbor. Ben had the tire shop. And we didn't have Finley Machine Shop in those days, even though we were on the water line. We had no modern conveniences. We had the outhouse. And Ben was a good neighbor, and quite often our staff took the opportunity to use Ben's facilities because we didn't have any in our place. And that was long before occupational health and safety and all the things we have today. But and Ben and I were good personal friends. I can remember, some of you will remember when the stores used to stay open till on Saturday nights. I guess in the real early days they stayed open until 11 o'clock at night, but in my day it was 10 o'clock. And we'd be down at the shop, and of course, unfortunately, the beer parlors closed at 10 o'clock too. And what would happen, you'd be starting to shut up for the night and think we could get out of there and get to Danceland. And then along would come some of the crowd, and I could pretty well tell who was going to show up for their parts after they left the 10-cent store. Believe it or not, that's what called the beer parlor, because you could buy a glass of beer for 10 cents. That's a long time ago. Anyway, so that was fine. We'd get about 10:30. I'd close up and I'm walking and stop. Ben's light was still on, so we'd stop in there and we'd go up to the blue room and commiserate on how hard we worked and get home about 11 o'clock, get cleaned up, and then head for dance land. And because that, back in those days, the dances went till 1 or 2 anyway, at least. So those are some of the memories of my experience in business. Another thing was credit. Everything was done by credit. And we had a lot of good customers, God bless them, and most of them paid. But some didn't, but anyway. And I can remember well, the last week of the year, guys coming in with a stack of money, pay their bill, because back in those days, a lot of people didn't trust banks or didn't want a paper trail, I guess, or whatever. The first time I ever saw a $1,000 bill in my life was when one of our prominent farmers in the area came in, and I think his bill was about $7,000, and he peeled off 7 $1,000 bills, and I had never seen a $1,000 bill in my life. But that was everybody, and grocery stores were the same. You'd phone up, you'd have your groceries delivered, and hopefully you'd go down and the grocer would get his money but at the end of the month. But, you know, and many of you know what I'm talking about. There's Howard McConnell sitting there that worked for us for many years, and he went through this. But thank goodness, as I said, most of them did pay. But business has changed so much. I remember when we started sending out statements, people were quite offended, you know, because they got a statement in the mail. And there, of course, no Visa, no any of that kind of stuff. However, that's just some of my personal memories. But I guess the main thing is our business people went through some very, very difficult times to get this country on its feet, and certainly our farm families too. Everybody came through some very trying times, and it's through the perseverance and the determination of a lot of these early people that we've got the community we have today. So, as the program states, this is a tribute to honor the businesses early, past, present, and hopefully in the future, because there's a good future for this town. We've got good people, and your experience here this weekend will show that lots of you, even though you've moved away, this is still home. So thank you for listening to me. I made a mistake. I was calling bingo up there for the last hour and a half, and Lionel, I will turn it back to you and wish you all a very, very happy birthday for 150. Thank you.